Okay, tonight is Mosiah chapter 7.
And now it came to pass that after King Mosiah had had continual peace for the space of 3 years, he was desirous to know concerning the people who went up to dwell in the land of Lehi-Nephi, or in the city of Lehi-Nephi, for his people had heard nothing from them from the time they left the land of Zarahemla. Therefore they wearied him with their teasings. And it came to pass that King Mosiah granted that 16 of their strong men might go up to the land of Lehi-Nephi to inquire concerning their brethren. And it came to pass that on the morrow they started to go up, having with them one Ammon, he being a strong and mighty man, and a descendant of Zarahemla, and he was also their leader.
Right, so we have the people of Mosiah living in the land of Zarahemla. Okay, and as it's mentioned that now that 3 years have passed, if you remember at the end of the previous chapter, we said that they lived in peace for the space of 3 years. And so he's going to send some of the men to go searching out for a group of people who left some years ago, right, and they hadn't been heard from since. And in fact, as we're going to find out later on, I mean, I'm not talking about they left like last year. I mean, this is like quite a few years past, all right? And his grandfather was king when these people left, right? So they've been gone for quite some time, but, you know, say, well, they must be out there somewhere. There must be a group of people, I mean, perhaps the descendants of those people who are now out there for us to find. They're brethren, so I guess, you know, like we said other times, it's not like you can keep in touch very easily back at this time. You know, I mean, today is just send them a text message and see what they're doing. You know, but you know, you couldn't use phones or computers, or there's no post office, right? So really no means of communication. So the only way to find out what happened to them is go look for them. So that's what they're going to do. They're going to go look for them and see what's going on. All right, so he selects 16 strong men, as it says, into the land of Lehi-Nephi to look for this group. Right, and now the one that's mentioned as the leader here, a man named Ammon. Okay, we must remember that name because the name's going to come around later, right? The name of Ammon. He's a key participant in this chapter. Okay, so that's why they mention him here by name, because he has other roles to play as the story unfolds.
And now they knew not the course they should travel in the wilderness to go up to the land of Lehi-Nephi. Therefore they wandered many days in the wilderness, even 40 days did they wander. And when they had wandered 40 days, they came to a hill, which is north of the land of Shalom, and there they pitched their tents. And Ammon took 3 of his brethren, and their names were Amaleki, Helam, and Hem, and they went down into the land of Nephi.
Ammon is going to take some of the men with him. They got lost en route, right? They wandered for 40 days. 40 days, they finally came to this hill, and now they're going to go down into the land of Nephi to see what's going on. So he picks the 3 of the guys, and so 4 of them are now going to go down, leaving the other 12 behind for now, and basically we'll call you if we need you.
And behold, they met the king of the people who were in the land of Nephi and in the land of Shalom, and they were surrounded by the king's guard, and were taken and were bound, and were committed to prison. And it came to pass, when they had been in prison 2 days, they were again brought before the king, and their bands were loosed, and they stood before the king, and were permitted, or rather commanded, that they should answer the questions which he should ask them.
So who did they, by luck, run into here? Ran into the king, okay? So now it says that the king's guards take them, and they're bound and put in prison. I mean, here's the king, right? So it's their job to protect the king. Right, so yeah, here these strangers are coming, just when the king is out walking, right? They there was kind of a plot to kill the king, so they grab him and they arrest them, and basically, we'll grab him first and ask questions later. So they let him hang out there for a couple days, and then they're ready to question them to see what's going on, right? So it says they brought before the king, and they were permitted, or rather commanded, they should answer the questions, right? So we got questions for you now. We want to know what you're doing here.
And he said unto them, Behold, I am Limhi, the son of Noah, who was the son of Zenith, who came up out of the land of Zarahemla to inherit this land, which was the land of their fathers, who was made a king by the voice of the people. And now I desire to know the cause whereby ye were so bold as to come near the walls of the city, when I myself was with my guards without the gate. And now for this cause have I suffered that ye should be preserved, that I might inquire of you, or else I should have caused that my guards should have put you to death. Ye are permitted to speak.
They're being questioned by the king, so the king introduced himself. I'm going to say a little bit more about that in a minute. But yeah, it basically says, hey, you're bold enough to just kind of walk walking on us while I'm out walking around, and so, you know, what's the deal here? That's what we were saying before. I mean, is it some kind of a plot that I should be worried about, or, you know, why were you right there just as I was coming out to walk outside the gate, you know? Almost like they were plotting and planning and watching, right? And so, therefore, he says in 11, he says that's the only reason that we haven't killed you, because I want to know what the plot is. I want to know why you were here and why you were, you know, watching me or after me or whatever. I want you to tell me what was going on. That's the only reason that I didn't have you killed right away. Okay, now in verse 9, it's he's introducing himself here as well. So in the land that they left, which is the land of Zarahemla. Okay, as you may recall, there was a king named Mosiah. Okay, and then he had a son, and you remember what his son's name is? Benjamin. Okay. Who became King Benjamin. Okay, and then King Benjamin had a son who became king, and that's the king's name was Mosiah. I think we have a pattern here. Okay, and so that's where we are there, right? That Mosiah is the king in Zarahemla right now. Okay, now they're traveling to a land that they were calling Lehi Nephi. The king's name here was Limhi, right? That's the guy that they're talking to right now, Limhi, right? But now it refers to his father and then his father. Okay, it takes it also back a couple of generations, I hope. Yes. Okay. So the first guy here really was Zenith, right? And then his son was Noah. Right, not of Ark fame, right? And then his son would be Limhi. Okay, so that's where we are. So, and in fact, you know, the timing may have been, you know, fairly parallel for these, because like I said, I think the group originally left when the first Mosiah was king, right? And so you can see the progression here, right? And there's a reason we're capturing these names, because we're going to refer to them later.
And now when Ammon saw that he was permitted to speak, he went forth and bowed himself before the king, and rising again he said, O king, I am very thankful before God this day that I am yet alive, and am permitted to speak, and I will endeavor to speak with boldness. For I am assured that if ye had known me, ye would not have suffered that I should have worn these bands. For I am Ammon, and am a descendant of Zarahemla, and have come up out of the land of Zarahemla to inquire concerning our brethren, whom Zenith brought up out of that land.
So he says, you know, thanks for letting me talk and not killing me, right? And if you had known who I was, you wouldn't have even thought of killing me. They're related, right? They're really from the same. They started from the same place, right? He says, you know, Zenith, who had been his grandfather, was originally of this people, right? The people of Zarahemla. So they were really all one group of people. And then, you know, at some point Zenith left there and went over here. So really, as it continues down, so they're all related, if you will. Or, you know, it says we're your brethren, and we just came to find out, you know, what happened to you. So we're not the enemy here to kill you. We're in fact just trying to find out what was happening with you. So now he said who he is, right? And I'm from the land of Zarahemla, and which your grandfather was originally from there also.
And now it came to pass that after Limhi had heard the words of Ammon, he was exceeding glad, and said, Now I know of a surety that my brethren who were in the land of Zarahemla are yet alive, and now I will rejoice, and on the morrow I will cause that my people shall rejoice also. For behold, we are in bondage to the Lamanites, and are taxed with a tax which is grievous to be borne. And now behold, our brethren will deliver us out of our bondage, or out of the hands of the Lamanites, and we will be their slaves. For it is better that we be slaves to the Nephites than to pay tribute to the king of the Lamanites. And now King Limhi commanded his guards that they should no more bind Ammon nor his brethren, but caused that they should go to the hill which was north of Shalom, and bring their brethren into the city, that thereby they might eat and drink and rest themselves from the labors of their journey, for they had suffered many things. They had suffered hunger, thirst, and fatigue.
So the king's reaction to this revelation was what? Yay. Right. He was happy. Okay, he was happy to hear that because he said, "Well, you know, now I know that your people are still alive in the land of Zarahemla, because it's just a story, told of the place that they came from, and so now now he says, well, okay, good, so the people are still alive there, because they hadn't really, again, heard anything more, so, therefore they didn't know what had happened with them, if anything, and so he was glad to see that there were people from there still alive, and this way he knew that they were still together as a people. Now, Limhi and his people had a problem here. Being held there, basically, they were like slaves. They were, it says, well, they said they were heavily taxed, which means that I guess they did their work, if you will, but a large portion of that was taken away from them by the Lamanites. All right. So it says we have a burden which is grievous to be borne. So they're in a bad position here. The story of how this came about is actually going to be told in a few chapters. So that's why, if you're wondering why, I'm not going to tell you yet. Right. But there is a story, though, as to why they're found this way, because obviously they didn't start out that way. They were among the Nephi people, and they traveled to this land, and now suddenly they're in bondage to the Lamanites and enslaved and heavily taxed. And so there's a story that goes with that. And so in a couple of chapters, we'll tell you the story of how that came about. As you hear this kind of thing described, what is this the opposite of this arrangement? You heard King Benjamin describing, he says, I didn't put taxes on you, I worked for myself, and then you all could work for yourself, and instead of, as the king, I could have put a big tax on you, but I didn't. Well, here's the opposite of that. Here's a case where they were putting a heavy tax on the people and taking away what they were producing. King Limhi here, he had a proposal, all right, upon seeing Ammon, and when glad you're here, you can rescue us, and we'll be happy to be your slaves, right? We'd have to be your slaves and be their slaves, right? So, that was his proposal, and he'd be happy to have all his people go with them. Okay, so upon hearing this, all right, so now they're gonna talk it over dinner, right? They're gonna sit and have something to eat here, and then discuss the situation and what they might do about it.
And now it came to pass on the morrow that King Limhi sent a proclamation among all his people, that thereby they might gather themselves together to the temple to hear the words which he should speak unto them. And it came to pass that when they had gathered themselves together, that he spake unto them in this wise, saying, O ye my people, lift up your heads and be comforted. For behold, the time is at hand, or is not far distant, when we shall no longer be in subjection to our enemies, notwithstanding our many strugglings, which have been in vain. Yet I trust there remaineth an effectual struggle to be made. Therefore lift up your heads and rejoice, and put your trust in God, in that God who was the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, and also that God who brought the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt, and caused that they should walk through the Red Sea on dry ground, and fed them with manna, that they might not perish in the wilderness, and many more things did he do for them.
So we have another case of the king wanting to talk to the people, right? Just like what happened with King Benjamin. He says it's in a proclamation, everybody get together at the temple, I'm going to have something to say to you tomorrow, right? And basically, he's announcing, if you will, that we have a possibility here, right? That Ammon and his group have come, and they're from the land of Zarahemla, and hopefully they're going to help us get out of the mess that we're in here, right? So we've been subjected to our enemies for some period of time, and finally it appears we're going to be delivered from that. So, I use the word delivered because you see in verse 19 what God is being brought into it at this point, right? It's one thing to be looking at it like a war and strategy and escapes and whatever, that's one thing. But I said, hey, God's going to deliver us, right? God's going to deliver us, and just like He did for the people in Egypt, right? It's the same God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob who brought the children of Israel out of Egypt. They walked through the Red Sea on dry ground. Right, so if God was able to do that for them, He can get us out of this mess. Right, He can deliver us from the Lamanites here. And see, He sent people here to help us. And Ammon and them happened to come up just as the king is out walking that day, so they happened to have this chance meeting, and then they were able to share who they are and where they're from and what they can do. So obviously not a coincidence that God orchestrated it.
And again, that same God has brought our fathers out of the land of Jerusalem, and has kept and preserved his people even until now. And behold, it is because of our iniquities and abominations that he has brought us into bondage. And ye all are witnesses this day, that Zeniff, who was made king over this people, he being overzealous to inherit the land of his fathers, therefore being deceived by the cunning and craftiness of King Laman, who having entered into a treaty with King Zeniff, and having yielded up into his hands the possessions of a part of the land, or even the city of Lehi-Nephi, and the city of Shalom, and the land round about, and all this he did for the sole purpose of bringing this people into subjection or into bondage. And behold, we at this time do pay tribute to the king of the Lamanites, to the amount of 1/2 of our corn and our barley, and even all our grain of every kind, and 1/2 of the increase of our flocks and our herds, and even 1/2 of all we have or possess, the king of the Lamanites doth exact of us, or our lives.
Verse 22, it describes what the tax arrangement was, right? As I said, that there's percentages attached to these things. Right? It says we pay tribute to the king of the Lamanites, 1/2 of our corn and barley, all of our grain of every kind, 1/2 the increase of our flocks and our herds, 1/2 of all we have or possess. And if we don't come up with all that, then what happens? It says at the end, or our lives. Okay, so they had a choice, right? It's all of this or their lives, right? So they had a choice, and so this is what was expected of them. And so again, you can see it's not so much money per se, but rather things that are of value. They're different crops, their flocks and such. This is what was expected of them. In 20 and 21, it kind of hints that they're in this predicament for a certain reason. There was some mistakes made, right? And so that we're basically in this predicament because he's saying our iniquities. Not he himself was responsible, just for referring to the people in general. It does mention Zenith. It says he was overzealous to inherit the land of his fathers. So yeah, I guess we could say he was greedy, or at least or anxious to obtain this inheritance, whatever it was. That's why he made the journey in the first place, right? Because remember, they said they were all here in Zarahemla, and then it says a group of them left, to go to a different area, and they never came back. So again, that could well be what he was after, that he was going there to somehow inherit or gain this land, or maybe it was rich in whatever minerals or crops or whatever, and so they considered this part of the land of their heritage, so they went after this, and the result was this, right? That they weren't following God's direction and just being greedy and going where before the rest of the Nephites could get there, let me go grab it first, and then this was the result. So therefore, he entered into some kind of an agreement with the king of the Lamanites, right? And I think to me it makes it sound like he was kind of duped, right? Because it says he was being deceived by the cunning and craftiness of King Laman, right? So in other words, he was outclassed in that particular negotiation, whatever it was, and so the result is this, all right? And now they're in bondage and having to pay half or more of what they have to the Lamanites. So somehow I don't think they benefited very much from this arrangement.
And now, is it not this grievous to be mourned? And is not this our affliction great? Now behold, how great reason we have to mourn. Yea, I say unto you, great are the reasons which we have to mourn. For behold, how many of our brethren have been slain, and their blood has been spilt in vain, and all because of iniquity. For if this people had not fallen into transgression, the Lord would not have suffered that this great evil should come upon them. For behold, they would not hearken unto his words, but there arose contentions among them, even so much that they did shed blood among themselves.
Right, so in these verses, the word mourn is in here, right? And so yeah, basically mourning the fact that, look at where we are now, and it's really all because of iniquity, right? All because of disobedience to God, all because of not following God's direction, right? This is, we have people who've been killed, their blood has been spilled. This is, that's all because of iniquity, right? And now in 25, it says, if the people had not fallen into transgression, then the Lord would not have allowed this great evil to come upon them, right? So if they had followed God's direction, then this wouldn't have happened, because God would have protected them from that. So, so again, he's just kind of mourning the fact that the original people from 2 generations before didn't follow the direction of God, and now we're suffering as a result.
And a prophet of the Lord have they slain, yea, a chosen man of God, who told them of their wickedness and abominations, and prophesied of many things which are to come, yea, even the coming of Christ. And because he said unto them that Christ was the God, the Father of all things, and said that he should take upon him the image of man, and it should be the image after which man was created in the beginning, or in other words, he said that man was created after the image of God, and that God should come down among the children of men, and take upon him flesh and blood, and go forth upon the face of the earth. And now, because he said this, they did put him to death, and many more things did they do, which brought down the wrath of God upon them. Therefore, who wondereth that they are in bondage, and that they are smitten with sore afflictions?
As he's thinking back or relating some of the things that have happened in their history of being here, at the end of 25, I guess it has said, there were contentions among, he's talking about their own people now. It says there were contentions among them, even so much that they just shed blood among themselves. Right, so that was one thing that happened. Now in 26 it says, and they've slain a prophet of the Lord, a chosen man of God. Right, and why did they kill him? In the second half of 26 it says he told them of their wickedness and abominations, and then prophesied about the coming of Christ. Right, saying that that Christ would come down, and that man was made in God's image, and all the things which we take for granted. Today it's second nature to understand that, but this was a new thing to some of the people, and they didn't want to hear that. So they're remembering that these people were separate from these people. Right, see that King Benjamin talked about Christ and the ones who were here, but these people were over there, so they didn't necessarily know that. But through a prophet of God, now that prophet was able to share the same information with these people, but they weren't open to that. So it says here they killed the prophet because he dared to tell them about Christ, and that they needed to repent. And because the big thing about Christ coming is that it's a chance for repentance. It's a chance to be forgiven of your sins. It's a chance to go to heaven in spite of who we are and what we've done. Well, obviously people were wicked. They didn't want to hear that. They didn't want to hear that we need to repent and that we've done things wrong. Yeah, we do know who the prophet is, right? Because if you look at the 26, next to the word prophet is a little tiny a, right? And then when you go down to 26a, Mosiah chapter 17, verse 20, okay, is the story of the prophet Abinadi, right? And so that's who it's referring to here, okay? The king who was king at the time of the prophet Abinadi was Noah, right? The father of Limhi, so right, he's the one that had the prophet put to death. That story is still to come in the book, right? Because even though it's right now, it's the time of Limhi, he's going to tell the story of what happened, and so we'll basically go back in time here in a couple chapters and hear what came before this. So we will hear how Zenith came to this land and what happened to him. We're going to hear about King Noah and him killing the prophet, right? These are chapters to come. So we're coming in like at the end with Limhi, and then he's going to take us back and talk us through those things. So that's how we know what these things are about. But so when he's recalling these things here, we're going to find out later more specifics about that.
For behold, the Lord hath said, I will not succor my people in the day of their transgression, but I will hedge up their ways, that they prosper not, and their doings shall be as a stumbling block before them. And again he saith, If my people shall sow filthiness, they shall reap the chaff thereof in the whirlwind, and the effect thereof is poison. And again he saith, If my people shall sow filthiness, they shall reap the east wind, which bringeth immediate destruction. And now, behold, the promise of the Lord is fulfilled, and ye are smitten and afflicted. But if ye will turn to the Lord with full purpose of heart, and put your trust in him, and serve him with all diligence of mind, if ye do this, he will, according to his own will and pleasure, deliver you out of bondage.
All right, now if you look at the first part of that, 29 to 31, you reap what you sow. All right, if you're doing what's right, then good things will happen. If you're in transgression, then not so good things are going to happen, right? And in fact, I guess it says that in 30. It says, "My people shall sow filthiness; they'll reap the chaff thereof." All right, and so forth. So basically saying that summarizing that this is where we are because of transgression, because these things happened to us because we didn't follow the leading of God back at that point. All right, but now, so in 32 it says, "Behold, the promise of the Lord is fulfilled, and you're smitten and afflicted." All right, but now you come to verse 33, right, where it gives the hope of escaping the fate that you're in, right? Because if you turn to the Lord with full purpose of heart, put your trust in him, and then he can deliver you out of bondage, right? Which you can see it's really very similar to just talking about Christ in general, is that we're found in the bondage of sin when we meet the Lord, and then we turn our lives over to Christ, and he delivers us out of that bondage. He takes us out of the bondage of sin and puts us in a better place. And so here that's what they were looking for, just in a physical way, that they're in bondage to the Lamanites, and now they see that God has sent Ammon and his group there to take them out of bondage and then bring them to a better place. So it's interesting that he started out referencing how the prophet Abinadi talked about Christ and delivering them out of bondage. Now they're looking to be delivered out of this physical bondage. So he says, even though we're here because of what we did ourselves, yet God's going to make a way that we can be delivered out of this bondage.